This video was inspired by a friend who didn't understand why people make trigger warnings a free speech issue, particularly by the University of Chicago's letter denouncing trigger warnings and a case of someone who had to be hospitalized because of being exposed to content which involved suicide. At the time, I didn't have an argument that I could easily communicate, so I just held my tongue. I'm using this script writing to help formulate my thoughts into an easily communicable composition. Firstly, I don't think anyone but some radical psychologists would completely oppose content warnings of all kinds. By the way, for the purposes of this piece, trigger warnings, content warnings, etc. will be treated as meaning the same thing. But if you hear me talk about it somewhere else, trigger warnings will refer to the specific forms of warnings that I oppose, and content warnings will refer to the ones that I support. Because I'm taking a consequentialist approach, there are a couple factors to consider when talking about trigger warnings. There is the harm done by being exposed to material which, and I quote, potentially upsets. There is the harm done by the avoidance of situations which might potentially upset. Small but sometimes important considerations include the harm done by taking the time to consider what might upset someone, and the harm done by modifying the selective pressure of the providers of the material. The harm done by being exposed to such material varies depending on the nature of the material and the mental reasons behind why the material is upsetting. Things like PTSD episodes, panic attacks, and self-harm are all very obviously things that cause great harm. In contrast, things like taking offense, being uncomfortable, and disagreement involve much less harm. The harm done by the avoidance of situations is synonymous with the benefit of experiencing those situations, and this is where free speech comes in. In my video where I responded to Geek, Feminism, on free speech, which I will link to here and in the description below, I gave my case for the benefits of taking part in a discussion with ideas that one disagrees with. Another point to consider here is when it isn't even a free speech problem, but it is just a positive learning experience that is being avoided. The harm done by taking the time to warn is pretty simple. This would only matter when time is really valuable, so when the field is highly skilled. The harm done by changing the selective pressure is as follows. By encouraging material creators and those who showcase materials to put up content warnings, there is a slight decrease in the selective pressure of potentially more important qualities. This really only matters when the other qualities are actually important, and when small changes in selective pressures could cause large changes in those qualities. In other words, when the field is highly skilled and there is a low population of people who could perform the tasks that aren't already doing so. Alright, so we've gotten the factors out of the way. Let's move on to some examples. I found this site in a quick Google search and it lists a bunch of things they think should have trigger warnings before. These are the ones that I have a problem with, and luckily they all come one after the other. Discussions of isms, shaming, or hatred of any kind. Anytime slurs are used. This includes words like stupid or dumb, which are still widely considered to be socially acceptable. Transgendering or anti-trans views of bodies. Dismissal of lived oppressions, marginalization, illness, or differences. These are particularly prone to not causing serious harm when experienced, and these are particularly prone to being used to avoid important discussions that constitute an actual free speech issue. I also have very small issues with these three. But that's more of a general social criticism I have rather than an issue with the trigger warnings themselves. Moving on to the University of Chicago's letter to freshmen, I'd like to highlight this part here. Notice how they say so-called before trigger warnings and put quotation marks around trigger warnings. This implies that they support some form of trigger warning, just not as formulated by the people they are opposing here. Also notice how they put intellectual in front of safe spaces and put quotation marks around safe spaces. They made it very clear what they had a problem with, and it is very justifiable to have a problem with such things. My opinions on safe spaces are very similar to my opinions on trigger warnings, by the way. That's all I've got for this video. As always, if you think I'm missing any factors or I'm exaggerating the importance of some, please call me an idiot in the comments below. Oh, and in case anyone was wondering what the state of the channel is, I've been wanting to make some more videos on libertarianism, but I've been distracted by schools, and I keep trying to bite off too big of a topic to chew at once. But I have a couple of ideas for topics that should be short enough that I could get something out. In particular, I think I'll be responding to a part of a lecture by Dr. Walter Block.